Welcome to today's podcast. My name is Pearlie Burr, and I will be your host. Today's podcast guest is Craig McClintock of Liberty Utilities. Craig is a manager of technical training and quality assurance at Liberty Utilities. Welcome, Craig.
Good day, Pearlie. Thank you.
As is the case with all of our guests, I always like to have them tell us a little bit about their background. What should our listeners know about Craig McClintock's background?
I'm a licensed G1 technician. Started my career here in St. John. I've always been in St. John. I've been in the industry for approximately 22 years. I've been with Liberty slash Legacy Enbridge for approximately 17 years. The last 13 years, I've had the opportunity to manage our Call Before You Dig, our Click Before You Dig program, which is designed to help reduce the risk to our community and to all underground infrastructure with a free locating service, which is really the biggest asset of that. As for myself, my company, myself, my GM share the values of community, and they encourage me to be on a lot of boards, as you would know, Pearlie. I sit on the current sitting past chair of Safety Services New Brunswick. I'm the current vice chair of St. John Ambulance, and I also sit on on the board with the Atlantic Common Ground Alliance, which is an alliance that is designed for damage prevention right across Atlantic Canada, to try to benefit damage prevention. So a little bit about me.
So I guess before we get into Click Before You Dig, busy year coming up for Liberty Utilities. You have a lot of work planned around the province?
Yeah, there's services and work in the queue, so some main extensions and some new customers to go to, which is very exciting. Last year we did have the opportunity to go to a new community, which was Havelock, which was very exciting for us. So there's nothing that big maybe in the books for this year as a new community, but yes, some new sign-ons, some main extensions. So looking forward to another full year.
Great then. Okay, let's get into the main topic I want to talk about today, and that is, as you put it, it used to be called Call Before You Dig. Now, of course, with technology being the way it is, it's Click Before You Dig. Explain why this is a critical message, especially to anyone planning on doing any kind of digging this summer, or this year, I should say.
The short answer is just to know where things are, Pearlie. The call before, the click before you dig. The short answer is nobody knows where everything is, right? We might think that we've lived in our property for a long time, or we've always been there, or I've always lived there and never been anywhere else. But no one truly knows, right? So when we leave things open for assumptions or second guesses, well, we're leaving our things open for assumption or second guesses. So the click before you dig, the call before you dig, it's really the simplest way. It's trying to make that one call or that one click notification, make it easy for a digger, make it easy for a homeowner, to be able to access most utility companies. And I have to clearly say that here in New Brunswick, we don't have an active one-call system. A one-call system would give us access to all utilities at once. But through our dig line, which gives us quite a few members here in New Brunswick at 15, we can call it a dig line, but we don't actually have everybody active to call it that one-call system. So that click before, the exciting thing with the click before you dig, Pearlie, instead of the call before you dig, is also eliminating that other little bit of human element that we have, that when we're on the phone and we're trying to think of addresses, and when we click before we dig, we can get utility locates anywhere in North America. We can request them from a click, and it starts a process immediately. It starts it immediately. Whereas when you pick up a phone to make a utility request or any type of request, we're calling a human being, and that human being is going to enter the information and start a process when you can actually start that yourself, and not start a 3 or a 5 day window. That can happen instantaneously with Click Before You Dig. So that part is awesome with technology. The other thing is it also gives us, we can get a picture off Google Earth and explains where the person is and where they're digging, not just their address, but where they would like to put a guard in, or a fence post, or if it's another utility, where they're putting their infrastructure or where the dig is, with a map from Google Earth. And it's pretty easy to determine where the person's dig. There's no assumptions. There's no second guessing, right? So the benefits of the clicking instead of the calling are huge. I'm also going to be very transparent. We as utility companies also save money, right? Damage prevention is free to the user, but obviously the utility companies, we pay for it. And there are cost savings when you go electronic. But more importantly for me, from a safety standpoint, is the safety. It's having that map, that diagram, and starting the process immediately. You're not waiting for anything.
Now, does the client actually, or the person calling, do they actually see the map?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. At one time we used to have site visits and we would meet people. Now today with technology, we're sending it to them electronically. But yeah, they would call in that ticket request. We would then have a locator go out if required. If there's no gas within 300 meters of a residence, you get a clearance right away. Automatically. You're clear. Good to go. Right. But then if there's gas within 300 meters, we want to take the step. We'll come out and assess your property. Leave you with a detailed map, measurements of where that gas pipe or that infrastructure for that matter. This isn't just gas related, as we said. This is for all infrastructure owners. So we'll let you know where the infrastructure is and leave you a detailed map of your property.
Now, I think when most people hear call before you dig, click before you dig, they would suggest that that really is for contractors. But what you just said is for anyone digging. It's if you're digging some in your backyard or on your property. I know a property I used to live on had natural gas running across the front of it. So, I guess that's a point that you want to remind people of.
Yeah, awesome, Pearlie. Awesome. Yeah, because obviously when we get into occupational health and safety and we're talking about businesses and we talk about the Occupational Health and Safety Act, that states before beginning an excavation or trench, an employer shall ensure the location of any underground utility line or piping is determined. It puts that onus on the employer, as you say, and you have to be a business and have so many employees. But that on the weekend, the children that went and bought their mother a plant or a tree to plant in their yard, and that risk is still there for them, and they haven't been educated yet, right? Or you're going to dig that garden or put in your new fence post or your generator. So you're right. The message for the homeowner, the sad thing, a homeowner usually complete ignorance, but that's not helping them from the risk, as you and I know, right? That's taking them away from the due diligence as a homeowner and it not being legislation. So the Pipeline Act, which states any person proposing to undertake or undertaking a ground disturbance shall, before commencing any work or operation or activity, take all precautions reasonably necessary. That really is dictating to any person that lives inside the province of New Brunswick that before doing a ground disturbance, they have to call. So you're right. It's law here in New Brunswick. Just most of us aren't aware of it. We're not aware of it, right? But the risks are there. If the risk is there for a contractor putting a fence in my yard, those same risks are there for me, right? While I'm working on the weekend. So highly important that we call. Like stats and numbers, Pearlie. We've had over 500 strikes in our utility in the last 20 years, right? Over 45% might have been mitigated if the person picked up the phone and simply called us for a free utility locate, whether that was a homeowner or a contractor. 45% might have been mitigated by somebody picking up the phone and calling in for a free service, right?
Now, what's the liability if a contractor or a homeowner doesn't call and there's, say, a cut to your line? Do they have any liability?
Excellent question. And yes, same thing, right? Just like legislation, it's different, right? So occupational health and safety, if they haven't followed that due diligence, there's the potential for a $250,000 fine, 6 months in jail just through the occupational health and safety side of it. All right. Bill C-45 could come to account if you're an individual that has worked and your employee can prove you're competent and you didn't know better, right? So there's all those things that's through the workplace, that you can be charged. Our energy and utility board or national energy board would have the authority if need be, if somebody was penalized the right way or not following rules. So from a work safe standpoint, there's fines and things that can happen through work safe, through legislation. And then there's the homeowner who you can be penalized or you can pay for the damages, but there's also being the neighbor that took 911 service away from your community for the weekend. Yeah. Who wants to be the guy who we don't get to watch the hockey game tonight, because you didn't call for locates on your free private property for your free locate. So there's the implication to your community, to your family, to your neighborhood. But we also would be going after costs for lost gas, lost revenue if the pipeline was damaged. Again, there is that law that's province-wide that tells us we should have it. But obviously we also want to learn, help people educate and learn. So you don't want to be punitive right away. But we also have to cover losses, as you can understand.
Would you have many of those events where people are either charged or sent a bill for costs associated with a break-in?
Yeah. So most damages, we try to at least incur our costs. As we can appreciate, it took a little while to appreciate. Most people that damage this aren't being negligent, right? They're not purposely damaging the utility because they want to get hurt or they want to hurt somebody else. So as long as there's no repeat offender, or it's not negligence, or a lot of the time it's just paying our bill, our lost time, our staff. There has been one or two contractors that I know of charged through the EUB fines that the person didn't have a locate in place and they weren't following procedures, right? But again, you're looking for negligence or one of the positive things that comes up, we have had 500 strikes over, right? But no significant consequences, right? No loss of life, limb, or building due to those damages that we've incurred, right? Where they have in other places. So right now, as you know, sometimes fines and those types of penalties are left for the severe cases that fortunately we haven't had yet.
Now, you've been working in this area quite a while. Tell me about some of the maybe interesting situations or mishaps that you've witnessed over the years. I know every summer here in Fredericton, it seems like there's always on social media that someone has hit a Liberty line and, an area is closed down for a period of time. Any stories you want to share with us?
Oh, man. Where do you begin? And I sort of chuckle because we can learn so much from these events and save someone else from learning from them, Pearly. So, from something as simple as a person or a homeowner taking wooden stakes and sharpening them up and going to put them in the ground to protect their cedar hedge for the winter, but not thinking of everything else that's underground or what they're doing when they're going to protect their cedar hedge. And we were able to have one of those stakes go right through a 1-inch line of ours. And it pretty well plugged it and it sealed it, right? And that happened in November of 2010. Our pagers didn't go off till March the following year. So that was in the ground for 6 months. It plugged the ground. It plugged the line. It actually went right into the top of the plastic line and sealed itself up. Like if you or I went outside, Pearly, and we tried to do that, we couldn't do that. It would deflect off the side every time, right? How life works for us. It seems to do these things. And it held it straight for that man that day. And he was able to put it through our line. He goes back in March to remove his wooden stake. And I mean, it's got 45 PSI of gas helping him remove his stake, right? Because it was in the line. Those types of things. I'm in training. I was facilitating some training today. And behind me, I have a 2-inch piece of steel pipe. It's steel pipe, very thick steel pipe that runs our gas system. Somebody took a 5/8 rebar and they drove 5/8 rebar with a 10-pound maul. And they beat that 5/8 rebar so hard, Burley, that they beat it through the top of our steel main, and they put so much effort into it that they beat it at the bottom of our steel main.
Wow.
Right, with a 10-pound maul. You can see the arc in the 5/8 rebar, right? In St. John, New Brunswick, what did that man think he was driving that rod into? Rock, right? Rock. He thought it was driving it into rock. And he didn't have a locate. So he didn't see a yellow line. He put a lot of effort, and he beat that through the top of a 150 PSI steel main and out through the bottom. I am a firm believer. Had that man or that company called us, we put a yellow line on the ground, and he saw it. He wouldn't have put that effort. He didn't want to hurt himself that day. He didn't know. He thought it was rock. I never could have imagined that I would have a piece of steel pipe and I would have 5/8 rebar that a human being beat through the top of it and out through the bottom of it. But I have it and I carry it around and I demo with it because these types of activities happen every day, and the person doing them, if it hasn't happened to you, it's like you don't believe it, eh? Pearly, you've facilitated training I've been in, and I love it, right? You're always saying, I want a story. I need something to back it up. I need something, right? And it's so true. When something happens to somebody, it sinks in more. When there's a story that goes along with it, it just means so much more, right? So these people that I train that do property pins, and they would never have believed it. And now here we got an example. We got an example that went right through the steel. So it's not my words so much that need to speak anymore. I've got a story. I've got a picture. I've got a pipe that goes with it, right?
So what's the chance of an explosion when I puncture one of your lines?
Very, very low outdoors. Natural gas needs 5 to 15% gas in air mixture for it to ignite. There's a huge volume of air outdoors. So relatively low. I said we've had 500 strikes in our utility in the last 20 years. Over 95% of those strikes have been outdoors in an open excavation in an open trench. Our gas is 40% lighter than air. So it's relatively safe outdoors, open excavation, open trench. There's such a high volume of air and it's lighter than air that it's very, very low, very low.
Now, you mentioned something that earlier, you've already covered it, but I want to emphasize it, and that there's no cost to calling or clicking. So many people, health and safety, anything I try to do to make my work safer, it's going to cost me. In your case, no cost.
No, you're right. No cost for this service whatsoever for any utility company, right? To call or click before you dig to call for services. And then our company again, we understand prevention. It's these presentations and training that us and other utility companies will do for free. But that call is free. Mitigating a risk or helping you mitigate the risk, right? We want to help you preventatively mitigate the risk, so that's free. Big contractors, we're meeting them on site. We're meeting with them. We'll do refreshes, right? It's all about prevention, right? It's so much can be done in the forefront of the planning that if you were to charge $1 for this service and that one person didn't call, we've done a disservice. So, and again, I did say earlier that there's a cost, and that's true. That's to me. So I'm glad you clarified that, because this is totally free to every homeowner, every business, any caller, clicker, anybody in the province of New Brunswick. But as we can appreciate, there's a cost with anything. The cool thing today is these things are now run by non-for-profits in our province. So the call center isn't allowed to make money off of me. They're only allowed to operate and run as a non-for-profit. The profit that they actually made off of last year, this is really exciting. InfoX, it's a company out of Quebec. They're centralized because, again, it's a non-for-profit. We don't want just one for us. The money that they actually made off of us, because they can't make the money, they're investing back to us, and we're investing back into schools and programs to educate kids before they get out of high school, before you get to your first employer, to try to really get out there before they can get into the business or be asked to do the task. They would already be trained. I probably didn't tell my boy at 28 the right time when he shouldn't have been planting in the yard, because I didn't acknowledge it meant the same at home, right? And we know so much more today that it's got to be free. So it is. You're right. It's free for all the users. And now we're investing in our youth through the one call system, through that non-for-profit, investing in our community here in New Brunswick through a call center that's helping improve safety in our community. So it's really a win-win-win.
Now, you mentioned the use of stories. I hear you've got a couple of special stories I want to talk about. The first one involves something that's really growing, I guess, in concern here in our province, and that's ticks. And Lyme disease, of course, goes with it. You had an experience that I'd like for you to share with our listeners.
September 28th. It's one of these things that you remember certain dates and you remember certain times, Pearlie. And I did. I got bit by a tick. And it's interesting that you mentioned that it's high profile. This was just in our news the other day, right? And it actually leads into my story, but I did. I got bit by a tick, right? And I'm actually usually, I thought, pretty good at checking myself. I have pets. I have animals. I'm an avid. I like being outdoors. I'm a golfer. Anyway, somehow this man didn't check himself good enough. And I woke up in the morning and I found myself with a tick. Make a long story short, I was able to remove said tick. I went to my doctor's office, and my doctor's office told me to go to the pharmacy. When I went to the pharmacy, the nice girl at the pharmacy, when I told her that I had bitten by a tick and that I had the tick and that it had blood on it, so she knew that I had a couple of the signs. I had been bitten. It was bleeding. That I live out in East St. John, Rossi area, where it's really prevalent, Lyme disease and the ticks. Anyway, she said, she went to go to a cabinet to get me medication, actually, Pearlie. And the other girl stopped her. And the girl said, what are you doing? She said, well, he has the symptoms. He has 3 of the things for the tick and we need to get him. She said, you're not in Nova Scotia. She said, you're in New Brunswick. And the girl she works on both sides of the border. In Nova Scotia, she would have been allowed to give me medication to help me. Here in New Brunswick, she wasn't allowed to. So she sent me back to my doctor. So I go back to my doctor and my doctor somewhat hesitantly helps me. And I go back over to the pharmacist. And the pharmacist is like, he says, it's really unfortunate, but if you had removed this tick a certain way, I said, oh, yes, dear, I did it. And she said, well, no, but if you had to clean your wound with, I did that 3 times. And if you had to, and I said, yes, dear, I already did it. And she looked at me and she said, how did you do that? And at the time, Pearlie, I didn't know. And I thought about it for a second and I went, my work, my employer. Like I do locating. I'm in long grass. And my environmental health and safety manager, Scott Elliott, I used to think he's bugging us, and he does it twice a year, and he goes through the tick and how you remove it and what you do with it and the importance of it and how to clean it and to bring it with you. And I didn't think I really paid attention to the man, but look what I did. My brain picked up enough of that information, right, that I removed it properly. I did what I needed to do. I went and I took it in and I followed direction, Pearly. I finally, because I went with that pharmacist and she's helped me stand up for my rights. I got the pill that you take and the medication, right? And then I was able to come back just a couple months ago and have my second test. I'm negative, right? I didn't get Lyme disease from the tick that had Lyme disease. So, and that's repetitive training. I've worked for Liberty for 17 years, going on 18, and every 6 months, and I can't say it's been every 6 months, but geez, it's been at least for 14 years, right? Twice a year we go over the tick awareness because we know it's prevalent in our area, right? We know our people are in the long grass, right? So kudos to my company. And it's a reflection of the importance of repetitive training. Right. Shirley and I used to go obviously to conferences there at Safety Services, right? And Shelley and Duff, and they talk about the 40-40-20 and paying attention. And if you know, we know only 20 of your brain's paying attention, right? But if that 20% is there for 10 years and it picks up a little bit every year and it just holds on to a little bit, and we seem to be able to retain it that way somehow, right? We do. I retained what I needed, Pearly. I retained what I needed. I did what I needed to do in a stressful situation. I woke up by myself. And I was able to do it. So, it was, I'm not going to lie. People who know me, it's stressful, right? It's a thought. We have an employee at work that's been out for over 7 years with Lyme disease, right? We have another employee that we did have go out. I know I have 2 friends who have it. So it can be very serious, right? So, it needs to be taken seriously. So it's good to hear that our government has changed their tone on trying to help these things get out quicker. And they have. Now you can go to the pharmacy like you can in Nova Scotia as of this week, right? So, full circle, man, full circle.
Yeah, and there's so many people out there, whether it's someone that simply walks your dog every day, but again, so many people work in the outdoors in the summer. And it's an area that maybe a lot of companies haven't thought about, but they should. Great example. Another example, or another story from you. I believe you've also won a life-saving award for your role at an accident scene. Tell our listeners about that as well.
There's another one, Pearly. July 2020, right? You remember the days. 7:00 at night going home from work. This is the exact same story. It's a different story, but it's the exact same message, right? It's about this repetitive training. And I'm on my way home on the highway, and I'm driving at highway speeds on Highway 1. And all of a sudden there's chaos, and I can't determine what the chaos is, but it's chaos. And then we're all at a stop. And I remember yelling at everybody in my head to get out of their vehicle and help. Because there was a car that didn't look very good, right? And when I got up, I finally convinced myself, right? You've got first aid training, man. You're in a Liberty truck. You have all the gear you need. Get out of your truck. And I did. I got out of my truck that day, right? I walked up to the window. I walked up to the window of 2 kids traveling highway speeds, drinking and driving with no seatbelts on. And they hit the back of a parked van. I don't think I need to go into too many details of what I saw inside the car, other than to tell you that they were traveling at highway speeds with no seatbelts on, drinking and driving, and they hit a parked van. When I looked in the window, Pearly, I have a 20-year-old son, right? I looked in the window and I saw my kids, right? I saw my kids. But somehow, right, I reacted and I did things and I triaged and I helped. And somehow through life, a registered nurse stopped and a volunteer firefighter came behind me and things all pieced together, right? And to make a long story short, I'm talking to them afterwards and we're talking about the scene and we're talking about what we did. I'm saying what I wish I had done. Another guy, what he wished he had done. And one of the girls, the nurses, she said, you know what you did? And I said, what do you mean? She said, you don't even stop beating yourself up. She said, you got the PP out of your vehicle. She said, do you even know that your lights are on in your truck, right? So there I am, I'm standing, I got my PPE on. I'm not working, but I'm working, it's hours. I got my directional light on my Liberty truck to tell the traffic to go around me, and I didn't even notice that I did it. Right? I got my PPE and my traffic vest, and I originally had put that on because I was getting out in traffic. Right? This is COVID. COVID just started in March. This is July. I got COVID PPE on. Right? I did so many things, Pearlie, and I didn't understand why, right? I didn't understand why. And it goes back to training. It goes back to, I've been taking first aid training since I was a cadet. And then my company and legislation, they get me to take it every year, right? And you sit in refreshers and you sit in trainings, or I did. I shouldn't say everybody does. And you say, why are they making me do this again? I did this last year. And why do I have to wrap them again? And why do the ABCs matter? And and I didn't have to think that day, right? The day that I showed up and I looked in the window and I saw that mess and I thought it was my kids, I did what my training needed me to do. I didn't have to think. But if I didn't sit in the classroom, every year and I didn't retain that information and just a little bit, right? Just a little bit. The life changes that have happened to me since that car accident, right? Since that car accident, and understanding the importance of training, the importance of procedures, but more importantly, repetitive training. Going back, right? I told you I'm doing training today. I'm doing training with my company. I've been doing that training for 18 years. I'm going, why are they telling me those same numbers? Why are they? Because they're important. Because they're important, right? And this came full circle for me at that day of that car accident when I might not have done 100% of everything right, and nobody's expected to, right? But I did so many things that day. And that's repetitive training. That's going back. That's coming back. That's awesome that it's legislation here in our province. That we have to do this, that we have to take it back. So there's my story in July of 2020. And I did. It was a hard decision, to even just go get the life-saving award, right? Because you would like to think that anybody would do what you did, right? And there's many people that stopped. It was 3 other people that were with me that unfortunately during COVID, nobody wanted to talk to anybody. The cops didn't want our names. Like, it was a weird, eerie feeling, right? But that doesn't matter. There was me and 3 other human beings, that did things to help other people so that two kids can go home and hug their kids today because of us, right? And that's because of first aid training. And that lends to me being on the board of directors of St. John Ambulances and volunteering for my community and being an active member of Safety Services New Brunswick, right, who trains our bus drivers and does this community safety training and safe start programs for our kids. And it's important to start early, Pearlie, and it's important to do it repetitively. And I learned that late in my career, but I am delivering that message daily, man. I deliver that daily message. And I don't leave my boys. My boys and I, we don't go to bed without communicating, and it's a fist bump or a hug every single day since that day, right? Every single day since that day. Because it can be taken from me in a second. They tell you your car breaks down on the side of the highway. Get out of your car. Do not sit in your car. Get on the other side of the guardrail. People sit there every day, Pearlie. I won't sit there, man. I got a story. I won't sit there. I will not sit there. I'll get on the other side of the guardrail. I have a story.
Look, thank you very much for all that you've done. And certainly when you talk about training, that's what training is all about. It's if we do it and we do it often enough, then when something does happen, everything just clicks in. You don't have to think, and that's what good training is all about. Look, thank you very much, Craig, for taking the time to talk to us today about Click Before You Dig, as well as your own 2 stories. Keep up the good work.
It's been an honor and a privilege. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, thanks. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.